The afternoon sun beat down on the hood of the silver sedan as it rolled through the quiet streets of Millbrook, Georgia. Colonel David Park sat behind the wheel, his hands relaxed at 10 and 2. He had driven this route many times before, always on his way to visit his mother in the small town where he grew up. Today was no different, or so he thought. David was 42 years old, with graying hair at his temples and calm eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. He wore simple civilian clothes, a plain blue polo shirt and jeans. Nothing about his appearance suggested his rank or position. He preferred it that way when he was off duty. The uniform stayed at the base, along with the weight of command and the endless responsibilities that came with leading thousands of soldiers. His mother had called that morning, her voice weak but cheerful. She wanted him to bring her favorite soup from the Korean restaurant in the next town over. David had agreed immediately, as he always did. At 78 years old, she did not ask for much anymore. The drive was peaceful, the kind that let a man think and breathe. The radio played softly, some old country song he did not recognize. As he approached the town square, David prepared to make a left turn. He checked his mirror, saw no traffic behind him, and flicked his turn signal. The blinker clicked steadily as he slowed down and made the turn onto Maple Street. Everything felt routine and calm. That calm shattered when he saw the flashing lights in his rearview mirror. David felt his stomach tighten, not from guilt, but from experience. He had been pulled over before in small towns like this. Sometimes the stops were legitimate. Other times they felt like something else entirely. He took a deep breath and pulled his car to the side of the road, putting it in park and placing both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. Behind him, a white and blue police cruiser came to a stop. David watched in his mirror as two officers sat in the car for a moment, probably running his plates. He kept his hands visible and waited. This was the safest thing to do. He had given this same advice to his own son countless times. The driver's side door of the patrol car opened. A young officer stepped out, probably in his mid-20s. He wore mirrored sunglasses that hid his eyes and walked with the kind of swagger that came from too much confidence and too little experience. His hand rested on his belt, close to his weapon, as he approached the sedan. David kept his hands on the wheel and watched the officer approach in his side mirror. His heart beat a little faster, but he kept his breathing steady. Stay calm, he told himself. Be respectful. Do everything right. The officer reached the window and tapped on it with his knuckles. David pressed the button to lower the window, keeping his movement slow and obvious. "Afternoon, officer," David said politely. "Can I help you?" The young officer looked down at him through those mirrored sunglasses. David could not see his eyes, but he could feel the judgment in the officer's posture. The name tag on his chest read, Morrison. "License and registration," Officer Morrison said. His voice was sharp and cold, with no greeting or explanation. "May I ask why you pulled me over?" David asked calmly. "I said license and registration," Morrison repeated, his tone harder this time. "You can ask questions after I see your documents." David nodded slowly. "Okay. I need to reach for my wallet in my back pocket and my registration is in the glove box. I am telling you this so you know what I am doing." "Just keep your hands where I can see them," Morrison snapped. "Move slowly." David carefully reached for his wallet, moving his hand deliberately so there would be no confusion about his actions. He pulled out his driver's license and held it up so Morrison could see it clearly. Then he reached across to open the glove box, moving just as slowly. He found the registration card and pulled it out along with the insurance papers. He handed everything through the window to Officer Morrison. The officer snatched the documents from his hand and looked at them with narrowed eyes, though David still could not see those eyes behind the sunglasses. "David Park," Morrison read aloud, his tone mocking. "And what brings you through our town, Mr. Park?" "I am visiting my mother," David answered simply. "She lives here." Morrison made a sound that might have been a laugh. "That right? And you live where?" "About 40 minutes from here," David said. He did not mention the base. "Not yet." "Step out of the vehicle," Morrison ordered suddenly. David felt a chill run through him. "Officer, can you tell me what I did wrong?" "I used my turn signal back there. I was not speeding. I do not understand why you pulled me over." "I said step out of the vehicle," Morrison repeated, his voice rising. "Are you refusing a lawful order?" From the patrol car, David could see the second officer getting out. This one was older, maybe in his 50s, with a weathered face and tired eyes. His name tag read Rodriguez, He stood by the passenger door of the cruiser, watching but not approaching yet. David knew he had no choice. Arguing would only make things worse. He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped out onto the hot pavement. He kept his movements slow and his hands visible at all times. "Is there a problem, officer?" David asked again, his voice still calm despite the anger building inside him. Morrison walked around him slowly, looking him up and down like he was inspecting something suspicious. "Nice watch," he said, pointing at the simple Seiko on David's wrist. "That is an expensive piece. Where did you get money for something like that?" David felt the insult land but kept his face neutral. "I work for a living, officer." "Just like you." "Uh-huh," Morrison said, clearly not believing him. "And what kind of work do you do?" "I serve in the military," David said quietly. Morrison stopped walking and looked at him. Then he laughed, actually laughed, right in David's face. The sound was cruel and dismissive. "Oh, you serve in the military? Is that right? Let me guess, you are some kind of general or something?" David said nothing. He just looked at the young officer and kept his face calm. "What are you really?" Morrison pressed. "You deal drugs? You steal cars? Come on, be honest with me." David felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to stay relaxed. "I told you the truth, officer. I am in the army." Morrison turned away, still chuckling to himself. He walked back toward his partner, who was now standing closer, his expression uncertain. "Blake," Rodriguez said quietly, "maybe we should just give him the ticket and let him go." Morrison waved him off. "I am handling this, Rodriguez. Why don't you get back in the car?" Rodriguez did not move. He looked at David with something that might have been sympathy or maybe just discomfort. But he did not speak up again. David stood there in the sun, his hands loose at his sides, and wondered how this simple drive to see his mother had turned into this. He thought about all the years he had spent serving his country, all the sacrifices he had made, all the soldiers he had led. And here he was, being treated like a criminal on a street corner in the town where he grew up. Morrison walked back over to him, holding David's license like it was evidence of a crime. "So you are in the military, huh? What are you, one of those weekend warriors? You put on a uniform once a month and play soldier?" David took a slow breath. "Officer Morrison, I would like to speak with your supervisor, please." That was clearly the wrong thing to say. Morrison's face darkened behind those sunglasses. "Oh, you want to speak to my supervisor? You think you are special? You think you can just demand things?" "I am not demanding anything," David said carefully. "I am asking politely." "Well, I am denying your request," Morrison shot back. "You are being difficult, and that is a problem. In fact, I think you might be obstructing my investigation." David felt the situation sliding away from him, spiraling into something dangerous. Officer Rodriguez stepped closer now, his boots scraping against the pavement. David could see the concern in the older man's eyes, but Rodriguez still did not say anything to stop his partner. Morrison was clearly in charge of this stop, and Rodriguez seemed unwilling to challenge him directly. "Look," David said, keeping his voice as steady as possible. "I do not want any trouble. I just want to understand what I did wrong so this can be resolved." Morrison stepped closer, invading David's personal space. "What you did wrong is drive through my town with an attitude. You think you are better than me? You think you can just question me?" "I never said that," David replied. "I am just trying to understand." "You know what I think?" Morrison said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I think you are lying about everything. I think you probably stole this car. I think that watch on your wrist is probably stolen too. And I think you are going to have a very bad day if you keep running your mouth." David felt his hands curl into fists at his sides, but he forced them to relax. Getting angry would not help. It would only give Morrison an excuse to escalate further. He had seen this before, had heard stories from other Black and Asian officers about encounters like this. He had just never expected it to happen to him. Not after everything he had accomplished. "Officer Morrison," Rodriguez said quietly, "maybe we should just write the ticket and move on. We have other calls to handle." Morrison spun around to face his partner. "I said I am handling this, Rodriguez. If you have got a problem with how I do my job, you can take it up with the chief later." Rodriguez's jaw tightened, but he nodded and stepped back. David saw the resignation in the older officer's face and felt a small hope die inside him. Rodriguez was not going to help. Morrison turned back to David, his posture aggressive. "You know what? I think I need to search you." Put your hands on the hood of your car. On what grounds? David asked, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. On the grounds that I am a police officer and I told you to do it, Morrison snapped. That is all the grounds I need. Now put your hands on the hood before I make you do it. David wanted to refuse. Every part of him wanted to stand his ground and demand his rights. But he also knew how these situations could end. He had seen the news. He had read the reports. A black man arguing with a hostile police officer in a small southern town could end up dead, and the officer would claim he felt threatened. So David did what he had to do. He turned around and placed his hands flat on the hot hood of his car. The metal burned his palms, but he did not move. Morrison stepped up behind him and kicked David's feet apart roughly. Spread them wider, he ordered. David complied, humiliation burning through him hotter than the metal under his hands. Morrison began patting him down, his hands rough and aggressive, checking every pocket and running along every seam of David's clothing. It was not a professional search. It was meant to degrade, to put David in his place. What is this? Morrison demanded, pulling David's wallet from his back pocket. My wallet, David said. You already have my license. Morrison ignored him and opened the wallet, rifling through it. David had about $200 in cash, money he had withdrawn to pay his mother's caretaker. Morrison pulled out the bills and held them up. $200 cash, Morrison said loudly as if announcing evidence. Where did you get this kind of money? From my bank account, David said, his voice tight. Is it illegal to carry cash now? It is illegal to lie to a police officer, Morrison shot back. And I think you have been lying to me since I pulled you over. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, looking up and down the street. A few people had stopped to watch now. An older white couple stood on the sidewalk across the street, whispering to each other. A teenage girl held up her phone, clearly recording the encounter. Morrison noticed the girl and pointed at her. Put that phone away. This is police business. The girl lowered her phone slightly but did not stop recording. Morrison glared at her but turned his attention back to David's wallet. He pulled out credit cards, looking at each one. Then he found something else. David knew what it was before Morrison even pulled it out. His military ID card, the one that identified him as a full colonel in the United States Army. The card that proved everything he had been saying was true. Morrison held the card up, looking at it. For a moment, David felt a surge of relief. This would end it. Morrison would see the ID, realize his mistake, and let David go with an apology. It would be embarrassing, but over. But then Morrison laughed again, that same cruel, mocking laugh. Army Colonel? Morrison read aloud, his voice filled with disbelief and amusement. David Park, Colonel, United States Army? Oh, this is rich. David's heart sank. That is my military identification, officer. It is a federal document. You can verify it. Morrison held the card out toward Rodriguez, still laughing. Rodriguez, come look at this. This guy is really committed to his story. He even got himself a fake military ID. Rodriguez walked over and took the card, studying it carefully. David watched the older officer's face and saw his expression change. Rodriguez looked at the card, then at David, then back at the card. The realization dawned slowly across his weathered features. Blake, Rodriguez said quietly. This looks real. Of course it looks real, Morrison said, snatching the card back. That is the whole point of a good fake. These things are all over the internet now. You can buy them for $50. Officer Morrison, David said, his patience finally wearing thin. That is not a fake ID. I am a colonel in the United States Army. I command the garrison at Fort Henderson, about 30 miles from here. You can call the base and verify my identity. Morrison stepped closer to David again, waving the ID card in his face. You know what I think? I think stolen valor is a serious crime. I think you bought this fake ID and you go around pretending to be a soldier to get discounts and special treatment. That is disgusting. David felt rage building inside him, white and hot. He had spent 23 years in the Army. He had served 3 combat tours. He had led soldiers in battle, had held dying men in his arms, had written letters to the families of those who did not come home. He had sacrificed time with his own family, had missed his son's childhood, had put his life on the line again and again for his country, and this arrogant young officer was calling him a liar and a criminal. I am not a fake, David said, his voice harder now. I earned this rank through years of service and sacrifice. You are making a serious mistake. The only person making a mistake here is you, Morrison said. He pulled out his handcuffs. I am placing you under arrest for stolen valor, possession of forged government documents, and obstruction of justice. Blake, wait, Rodriguez said, stepping forward. We should call this in first. We should verify the ID before we make an arrest. I do not need to verify anything, Morrison said. This guy is a liar and a fake, and I am taking him in. David's mind raced. If Morrison arrested him, if he was taken to the station in handcuffs, the humiliation would be complete. Even after the truth came out, the damage would be done. People would have seen him arrested. The story would spread, and Morrison would probably face no consequences at all. I want to make a phone call, David said firmly. You will get your phone call at the station, Morrison replied, moving toward him with the handcuffs. Officer Rodriguez, David said, looking at the older man directly. You know that ID is real. I can see it in your face. You are about to let your partner make a terrible mistake. Is that really what you want? Rodriguez looked torn, his eyes moving between David and Morrison. The older officer opened his mouth to speak, but Morrison cut him off. Rodriguez, get back to the car. I will handle this. Blake, I really think we should call the base, Rodriguez insisted. It will take 5 minutes. If he is lying, we arrest him. If he is telling the truth, we let him go. What is the harm in checking? Morrison's face flushed red with anger. The harm is that you are questioning my judgment in front of a suspect. This is my stop, Rodriguez. I am the senior officer here. David almost laughed at that. Morrison was maybe 2 years senior to Rodriguez in the department, but he acted like he was the chief himself. The tension on the street corner had grown thick enough to cut with a knife. More people had gathered now, drawn by the commotion. David could see at least a dozen faces watching from doorways and sidewalks. Several phones were pointed in their direction, recording everything. The afternoon sun continued to beat down mercilessly, and sweat had begun to trickle down David's back. Morrison grabbed David's arm roughly, spinning him around to face the car again. Hands behind your back, he ordered. I am requesting permission to make a phone call before you arrest me, David said loudly, making sure his voice would be picked up by the recording phones. I have the right to verify my identity. You have the right to shut up and follow my orders, Morrison snapped. He yanked David's right arm behind his back. Blake, stop! Rodriguez finally raised his voice. This is not right, and you know it. Let him make the call. Morrison paused, his hand still gripping David's arm. For a moment, David thought the young officer might actually back down, but then Morrison's grip tightened. Are you refusing to follow my orders, Rodriguez? Morrison asked dangerously. Rodriguez took a step back, his face showing the conflict raging inside him. David could see the older officer wanted to do the right thing, but he was also afraid of the consequences. Afraid of angering his partner, afraid of rocking the boat, afraid of standing up when it mattered most. It was a fear David had seen before in soldiers who lacked courage. He had no respect for it. Officer Rodriguez, David said clearly, when this is over, when the truth comes out, you are going to have to live with the choice you make right now. Is this really the officer you want to be? Rodriguez's face showed shame, but he still did not act. He just stood there, frozen by his own cowardice. Morrison laughed triumphantly. Looks like Rodriguez knows his place. Unlike you. He pulled David's other arm back. I am telling you for the last time, David said, his voice rising with barely controlled anger. I am Colonel David Park, United States Army. I command Fort Henderson. I have served my country for 23 years. You are making the biggest mistake of your life. The only mistake here is yours, Morrison said. He clicked one handcuff onto David's right wrist. That was when the older white woman broke through the small crowd that had gathered. Stop this right now, she shouted, her voice shrill but commanding. Morrison looked up, annoyed. Ma'am, step back. This is police business. The woman ignored him and marched right up to the scene. She was probably in her 70s, with white hair and sharp blue eyes. She wore a church dress and carried a purse that looked older than Morrison, but there was steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. I know exactly who this man is, she declared, pointing at David. That is Colonel Park. He was just at the community center last month for the Medal of Honor ceremony. Morrison's hand froze on the second handcuff. Ma'am, I need you to step back. I will not step back, the woman said firmly. My grandson serves under Colonel Park at Fort Henderson. I was there when the colonel received a commendation from the Secretary of the Army himself. This man is a decorated war hero, and you are treating him like a criminal. David felt a surge of hope. He remembered the ceremony now. Lieutenant Sarah Chen's grandmother had attended, had thanked him personally for being a good commander to her granddaughter. This was Mrs. Chen. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, David said quietly. She looked at him with recognition and kindness. Colonel Park, I am so sorry this is happening to you. Morrison's face had gone from confident to uncertain. He looked at Mrs. Chen, then at David, then at the crowd of people recording everything. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression. Lady, I do not care who you think this man is, Morrison said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He could not provide proper identification. He showed you his military ID. Mrs. Chen shot back. What more do you want? That ID is fake, Morrison insisted, but now he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Then call the base and verify it, Mrs. Chen demanded. What are you afraid of? That you might be wrong? Rodriguez stepped forward again, emboldened by the civilian's courage. Blake, she is right. We should make the call. This has gone on long enough. Morrison looked around at all the faces watching him, at all the phones recording him, at the way the situation had slipped completely out of his control. David could see the young officer's mind working, trying to find a way out that would let him save face. Fine, Morrison said finally, releasing David's arm. The handcuff still dangled from David's right wrist. Make your phone call, but you are not going anywhere. David rubbed his wrist where the metal had bitten into his skin. He pulled his phone from his pocket slowly, making sure Morrison could see every movement. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from suppressed rage. He scrolled through his contacts and found the number for his aide, Captain James Okoye. He pressed the call button and put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. It rang twice before James answered. Colonel Park, sir. Is everything all right? The sound of his aide's voice, the immediate respect and recognition, sent a wave of relief through David. Captain Okoye, I need you to listen carefully. I have been detained by local police in Millbrook, Georgia. The officer does not believe my military identification is genuine. I need you to send verification of my identity immediately. There was a brief pause on the other end. When James spoke again, his voice was tight with controlled anger. Sir, are you in danger? I am being treated with disrespect and suspicion, David said carefully, but I am not in immediate danger. Understood, sir. Can you give me the officer's name and badge number? David looked at Morrison, who had gone pale. Officer Blake Morrison, Millbrook Police Department. Badge number 347, Rodriguez added quietly, clearly wanting to help now that things had shifted. I have that information, James said. Colonel, I'm going to put you on hold for 30 seconds while I contact General Williams. Please stay on the line. The mention of General Williams made Morrison's eyes widen. Even a rookie cop in a small town knew what a general was. The hold music played tinnily through the phone's speaker. The crowd waited in silence. David stood there with one handcuff still dangling from his wrist, an absurd symbol of the humiliation he had endured. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Look, maybe there has been some misunderstanding here. No maybe about it, Mrs. Chen said sharply. You owe this man an apology. Before Morrison could respond, Captain Okoye came back on the line. Colonel Park, sir. General Williams is extremely concerned about this situation. He is contacting the Millbrook police chief directly. In the meantime, I am dispatching a security detail from the base to your location. They should arrive in approximately 15 minutes. Thank you, Captain, David said. Sir, the general wants to know if you require medical attention or legal assistance. David looked at Morrison, whose face had gone from pale to gray. Not at this time, but I appreciate the offer. Understood, sir. The detail is on its way. Please stay safe. David ended the call and put his phone back in his pocket. He held up his right wrist with the handcuff still attached. Officer Morrison, I would like this removed now. Morrison fumbled with his keys, his hand shaking slightly as he unlocked the handcuff. It fell away, leaving a red mark on David's wrist. Rodriguez stepped forward and did something David had not expected. He extended his hand. Colonel Park, I apologize for what happened here today. This was not right. David looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Rodriguez had not stopped Morrison when it mattered. He had stood by and let it happen. But at least now he was trying to make it right. which was more than Morrison was doing. David shook Rodriguez's hand briefly. "Thank you, Officer Rodriguez." Morrison stood there, his earlier confidence completely shattered. He looked at David but could not quite meet his eyes. "I was just doing my job." "No," David said firmly. "You were profiling me. You saw a middle-aged Asian man in a nice car and you assumed I was a criminal. You saw my military ID and called it fake because you could not imagine that someone who looks like me could earn the rank of colonel. That was not you doing your job. That was you acting on your prejudices." Morrison's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. He knew he was caught. Mrs. Chen smiled with satisfaction. "Good for you, Colonel." Someone needed to say it. The crowd had grown larger now, maybe 30 people scattered around the scene. Some were recording, some were just watching, but all of them had witnessed what happened. David knew this would be online within the hour. Morrison's career was probably over, and part of David felt satisfied by that thought. But another part of him felt only sadness. This was not the first time something like this had happened, and it would not be the last. How many other people had Morrison treated this way? How many had not had the resources or the rank to fight back? In the distance, David heard the sound of sirens approaching. Multiple sirens coming fast. The sirens grew louder with each passing second. Morrison's head snapped toward the sound, his expression shifting from uncertainty to something approaching panic. Rodriguez stood straighter, his hand instinctively moving to adjust his uniform. David remained still, his arms crossed over his chest, watching the street where the vehicles would appear. Mrs. Chen patted David's arm gently. "Justice is coming, Colonel. These boys are going to learn a hard lesson today." The crowd had swelled to nearly 50 people now. Word had spread through the small town with remarkable speed. David recognized some faces from his childhood, people who had known him when he was just a kid running through these same streets. Others were strangers, but they all shared the same expression as they watched the scene unfold. Some looked angry, others satisfied, a few uncomfortable. The first vehicle to appear was a Millbrook police cruiser, its lights flashing. It screeched to a stop behind Morrison's patrol car. The police chief himself stepped out, a heavy-set man in his 60s with gray hair and a red face that suggested high blood pressure. Chief Robert Thompson had been the chief for 20 years, and everyone in town knew him. Right behind the chief's car came 3 military police vehicles, their distinctive white paint and military insignia unmistakable. These were Humvees, not regular cars, and they looked impressively official as they pulled up. The sight of them made several people in the crowd pull out their phones to take pictures, but it was the 4th vehicle that made Morrison's face drain of all remaining color. A black staff car with small flags mounted on the front rolled up slowly and stopped. The flags bore a single white star on a red background, a brigadier general's flags. David had not expected General Williams to come personally. He had assumed the general would send his aide or maybe the base's legal officer, but here was the commanding general of the entire regional command, stepping out of his vehicle with an expression that could freeze fire. General Marcus Williams was 60 years old, a tall black man with silver hair and 3 rows of ribbons on his chest. He had commanded in 2 wars and earned his star through decades of exemplary service. He was also David's mentor and friend, though few people knew about their relationship. Behind the general came his aide, Captain Okoye, and the base's senior legal officer, Major Patricia Walsh. 6 military police officers fanned out from the Humvees, taking positions around the area with professional precision. They did not draw weapons or act aggressively, but their presence was unmistakably authoritative. Chief Thompson hurried forward, his face now even redder. "General Williams, sir, I apologize for any inconvenience. I was just informed of the situation and came immediately." General Williams ignored him and walked straight to David. When he reached the colonel, the general's expression softened slightly. "David, are you all right?" David nodded. "I am fine, sir. Just angry." Understandably. The general's eyes swept over David, checking for injuries, then landed on the red mark around his wrist where the handcuff had been. His jaw tightened. "Who put handcuffs on you?" "Officer Morrison," David said, nodding toward the young officer who now looked like he wanted to sink into the pavement. General Williams turned to face Morrison. The young officer actually took a step backward. The general did not raise his voice, but the authority in it was absolute. "Officer, I want you to explain to me why you detained and attempted to arrest a full colonel in the United States Army." Morrison's mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. Sir, He could not provide adequate identification. He could not provide identification, the general repeated slowly. So Colonel Park did not show you his driver's license? He did, but... And did he not show you his military identification card? He did, sir, but I thought it was fake, Morrison stammered. You thought it was fake, General Williams said. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Tell me, officer, what training do you have in identifying forged military documents? Morrison said nothing. Answer the question, Chief Thompson barked, finally finding his voice. None, sir, Morrison admitted quietly. So you had no expertise, no training, no qualification to determine whether the identification was genuine or not. Yet you made that determination anyway, the general said. And based on your uninformed opinion, you handcuffed a United States Army colonel on a public street corner. Rodriguez stepped forward. General Williams, sir, I tried to suggest that we verify the identification by calling the base, but Officer Morrison refused. The general turned his sharp gaze on Rodriguez. And yet you did not insist. You did not call yourself. You stood by and watched your partner violate this man's rights. Rodriguez's face went red, but he nodded. Yes, sir, I did. I should have done more, at least he owned it, David thought. That was something. Chief Thompson moved closer to Morrison, his own anger now visible. Blake, is this true? Did you refuse to verify his identification? Morrison looked at his feet. I did not think it was necessary, Chief. You did not think it was necessary, Thompson repeated, his voice rising. You detained a decorated military officer, accused him of crimes, handcuffed him, and you did not think it was necessary to verify his identity before doing so. The crowd was completely silent now, everyone watching the confrontation unfold. Several people were still recording, capturing every word. General Williams gestured to Major Walsh, who stepped forward with a tablet computer. Colonel Park commands Fort Henderson Garrison. He is responsible for the training and readiness of over 4,000 soldiers. He has served 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He holds the Bronze Star with Valor device, the Purple Heart, and the Meritorious Service Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters. The general paused, letting that sink in. He has also been personally commended by the Secretary of Defense for his work in counterterrorism operations, and has briefed members of Congress on military readiness. In short, Colonel Park is exactly the kind of officer this nation relies on to keep us safe. Morrison looked sick. David almost felt sorry for him. Almost. And you thought this man was a criminal, the general continued. You thought he had fake identification in a stolen car. Tell me, officer, what led you to that conclusion? What evidence did you have? Morrison remained silent. I will tell you what evidence you had, General Williams said, his voice hard as iron. You saw a middle-aged Asian man driving a nice car in your town, and you made assumptions based on his race. That is called racial profiling, officer, and it is illegal. I was not profiling him, Morrison protested weakly. Mrs. Chen spoke up from the crowd.
Yes, you were.
I heard everything you said to him. You questioned how he could afford his car and his watch. You called him a liar and a fake. You laughed at his military service. We all heard it, and many of us recorded it. Several people in the crowd murmured in agreement. A few held up their phones as evidence. Chief Thompson looked like he might have a heart attack. Blake, is this true? Morrison said nothing, which was answer enough. The chief turned to David, his expression a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Colonel Park, on behalf of the Millbrook Police Department, I sincerely apologize for what happened here today. This is absolutely unacceptable, and I assure you there will be consequences. David nodded but did not speak. He was still too angry to trust himself to be diplomatic. General Williams was not so restrained. Chief Thompson, with all due respect, an apology is not sufficient. Colonel Park was detained without cause, accused of serious crimes, handcuffed, and humiliated in public. This incident was witnessed by dozens of people and recorded by multiple cameras. It will be on social media within the hour, if it is not already. The chief's face went even redder. I understand, General. I assure you that Officer Morrison will face disciplinary action. He will face more than that, the general said. I want a full investigation into this incident. I want to know if this is a pattern of behavior or an isolated incident. And I want to know what training your officers receive regarding racial bias and proper procedures for verifying identification. Captain Okoye stepped forward with a folder. Chief Thompson, Major Walsh will be coordinating with your department on the investigation. We will also be filing a formal complaint with the State Police Oversight Board. Thompson took the folder with shaking hands. Of course. Whatever you need. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Chief, if I may, I think we should also review other stops Officer Morrison has made recently. If this is how he treated a colonel, I am concerned about how he might have treated others who did not have the resources to fight back. David looked at Rodriguez with new respect. The older officer was trying to make amends, trying to do the right thing even though it was too late to help David directly. Thompson nodded. Good thinking, Rodriguez. I want a full review of all of Morrison's activity reports for the past 6 months on my desk tomorrow morning. Morrison finally found his voice. Chief, I want to say that I am sorry. I made a mistake. You made more than a mistake, Thompson said coldly. You embarrassed this department, violated the rights of a decorated military officer, and potentially exposed us to a massive lawsuit. The afternoon sun had started to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street where everyone had gathered. David stood there surrounded by military personnel, police officers, and dozens of townspeople, feeling a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion. He had been proven right, but the victory felt hollow. General Williams stepped closer to David, speaking quietly enough that only he could hear. David, I want you to know that we are going to handle this properly. This will not just disappear. I know, sir, David replied. I trust you. The general nodded, then turned back to address the group more loudly. Chief Thompson, I want to make something clear. This is not just about Officer Morrison. This is about systemic issues that allow this kind of behavior to happen in the first place. Thompson shifted uncomfortably. General, I run a good department. We have policies and training. Then those policies and training failed today, General Williams said bluntly. Colonel Park should never have been in this situation. The fact that he would suggest deeper problems. Major Walsh stepped forward, her voice professional and clinical. Chief, we have documented 17 similar complaints against officers in surrounding counties over the past 2 years. Minority drivers pulled over without clear cause, subjected to aggressive questioning, having their credentials questioned. This appears to be part of a larger pattern. David had not known about those other cases, but hearing about them made his anger burn hotter. How many others had been through this? How many had not had a general and military police show up to defend them? Mrs. Chen spoke up again from the crowd. My grandson is not the only one from Fort Henderson who has family in this town. There are dozens of military families here, and I can tell you, General, that several have mentioned being pulled over for no good reason. General Williams's expression grew even more serious. Chief Thompson, it sounds like your department has a problem that needs to be addressed immediately. Thompson looked around at the crowd, at all the recording phones, at the military vehicles parked on his town's main street. David could see the chief calculating, trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. But there was no way to minimize this. It was already out of control. I will form a committee to review our procedures, Thompson said finally. We will bring in outside consultants to assess our training program and make recommendations. That is a start, the general said. But I want more than that. I want regular meetings between your department and Fort Henderson command staff. I want joint training sessions on bias and proper procedure. And I want quarterly reports on traffic stops broken down by race to ensure this does not continue. Thompson looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew he had no leverage. I will make it happen, General. Morrison stood off to the side, looking smaller than he had an hour ago. David watched the young officer and tried to find some sympathy for him, but it was difficult. Morrison had been so confident in his prejudices, so certain that he was right. He had treated David like a criminal without a second thought. Officer Morrison, General Williams said, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Step forward. Morrison walked forward slowly like a man approaching the gallows. Look at Colonel Park, the general ordered. Morrison raised his eyes to meet David's gaze. There was shame there now and fear, but David wondered if there was any real understanding. Did Morrison truly comprehend what he had done wrong, or was he just afraid of the consequences? I want you to apologize to the colonel, General Williams said. Not because I'm ordering you to, but because it is the right thing to do. Morrison swallowed hard. Colonel Park, I apologize for how I treated you today. I made assumptions I should not have made, and I handled the situation poorly. I am sorry. The words sounded rehearsed, mechanical. David had heard better apologies from privates caught stealing from the mess hall. But he nodded anyway. I accept your apology, Officer Morrison. I hope you learn from this. I will, Morrison said quickly. I promise I will. David was not sure he believed that, but it was not his problem anymore. Morrison would face whatever consequences the department and the courts decided were appropriate. Chief Thompson gestured toward Morrison. Blake, give me your badge and your weapon. You are suspended pending a full investigation. Morrison unclipped his badge with shaking hands and handed it over, along with his service weapon. Without them, he looked even younger, like a kid playing dress-up in his father's uniform. Rodriguez stepped forward to take possession of the weapon, handling it carefully. You can go home now, Thompson told Morrison. Report to my office tomorrow morning at 8 sharp. We will discuss your future with the department then. Morrison nodded and walked toward his personal vehicle, parked a block away. The crowd parted to let him through, but David noticed that no one spoke to him or offered any sympathy. He was completely alone. As Morrison drove away, the tension on the street seemed to ease slightly. People started talking in normal voices again, though many continued recording and watching. General Williams turned to David. What do you want to do now, Colonel? David thought about that question. What did he want? He wanted to turn back time and avoid this entire situation. He wanted to live in a world where his rank and his service and his character were enough to protect him from being treated like a criminal. But that world did not exist. I want to continue to my mother's house, David said. She is expecting me and she worries when I'm late. The general smiled slightly. Of course. Would you like an escort? David shook his head. No, sir. I think I have had enough police presence for one day. Understood. The general extended his hand. I am proud of how you handled this situation, David. You kept your composure and your dignity even when you were being treated abhorrently. That takes real strength. David shook the general's hand. Thank you, sir. Though I wish I had not needed to demonstrate that particular strength today. So do I, the general said quietly. Captain Okoye approached with David's wallet and military ID, which had been held as evidence. Your belongings, sir. Everything is accounted for. David took them and checked quickly. His cash was still there, his cards, everything. He put the wallet back in his pocket and looked at his military ID for a moment. The small plastic card that had caused so much trouble. He had carried it for years without incident, a symbol of his service and sacrifice. Today it had been called fake, worthless, a lie. He slipped it back into his wallet. Major Walsh handed him a business card. Colonel, if you experience any retaliation or further issues, please contact me immediately. We will be monitoring the situation closely. Thank you, Major, David said, taking the card. Rodriguez approached hesitantly. Colonel Park, may I speak with you for a moment? David nodded, and they walked a few steps away from the others. Rodriguez looked tired and ashamed. Sir, I want you to know that I'm sorry I did not do more to stop Blake. I knew it was wrong, but I did not want to cause problems with my partner. That was cowardice, and I own that. David appreciated the honesty. What will you do differently next time, Officer Rodriguez? Rodriguez met his eyes. I will speak up immediately, regardless of the consequences. I will not stand by and watch someone's rights be violated, even if it costs me my job. Good, David said, because there will be a next time. Maybe not with me, but with someone else who does not have a general and military police to back them up. They will need officers like you to stand up and do the right thing. Rodriguez nodded slowly. I understand, sir, and I promise I will. They shook hands again, and David walked back to his car. The crowd had started to disperse now that the main event was over, though several people stopped to shake his hand or thank him for his service. Mrs. Chen hugged him and made him promise to give her regards to his mother. David got into his car and started the engine. The vehicle that had been the subject of so much suspicion and questioning was just a car again, nothing more. He pulled away from the curb slowly, passing the military vehicles and the remaining police cruiser. As he drove through town toward his mother's house, he passed familiar landmarks from his childhood. The library where he had spent countless hours reading, the park where he had played basketball with friends, the school where he had learned and grown and dreamed of a future where he could serve his country. He had achieved that dream. He had served with honor and distinction. He had earned his rank through sacrifice and dedication, and yet to Officer Morrison none of that had mattered. All Morrison had seen was a middle-aged Asian man who did not belong. David's phone rang. His mother's number appeared on the screen. He answered, putting it on speaker. Hi, Mom. David, where are you? Her voice was concerned. You said you would be here by 3 o'clock. It is almost 4 now. I am sorry, Mom, I got delayed. I will explain when I get there. Are you all right? You sound upset. David smiled despite everything. Mothers always knew. I am fine, Mom. I will be there in 5 minutes. Okay, drive safely. I love you. I love you too, Mom. David pulled into his mother's driveway a few minutes later. The small house looked exactly as it always had, with its white siding and blue shutters, the rose bushes his father had planted before he died, and the ramp David had installed last year, when his mother's arthritis made the front steps difficult to manage. It was home, or at least the closest thing he had to one these days. His mother stood at the front door leaning on her cane. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, but she had always been fierce. When David's father died, she had raised David and his sister alone, working 2 jobs and never complaining. She had taught him about dignity and perseverance and the importance of standing up for what was right. Looking at her now, David felt the events of the afternoon finally catching up to him. You look terrible, she said as he walked up the ramp. What happened? David hugged her carefully, mindful of her fragile bones. I got pulled over. She pulled back to look at his face. Did you get a ticket? No, Mom. It was not about a ticket. He helped her back inside and they sat down at her kitchen table, the same table where he had done his homework as a child. I got profiled by a police officer who did not believe I was in the military. His mother's expression hardened. Tell me everything, so David told her. He explained the traffic stop, Morrison's attitude, the accusations, the handcuffs, all of it. His mother listened without interrupting, her face growing more and more angry. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, This is why I worry every time you drive through these small towns. This is why I tell you to be careful. I know, Mom. You are a colonel in the United States Army, she said, her voice shaking slightly. You have served your country with honor. You have earned respect, and yet that young police officer saw nothing but your face and decided you were a criminal. David reached across the table and took her hand. It is over now, Mom. The general handled it. Morrison has been suspended. Suspended is not enough, his mother said fiercely. He should be fired. He should never wear a badge again. David agreed, but he was too tired to say so. The adrenaline that had kept him going during the confrontation had faded, leaving him feeling empty and worn out. His mother stood up slowly. I'm going to make tea, and you are going to eat something. You always forget to eat when you are upset. While she busied herself in the kitchen, David's phone began buzzing with messages. He looked at the screen and saw texts from fellow officers, friends from the base, even some from people he had not spoken to in years. News of the incident was spreading fast. One message was from his son Michael, who was a sophomore at college. Dad, just saw a video online. Are you okay? Call me when you can, David texted back quickly. I am fine. We'll call you tonight. Love you. His sister Jennifer called next. David, what the hell happened? Mom just texted me. I'm at Mom's house now, David said. I am okay, really. A cop handcuffed you? Jennifer's voice was furious. Did you get his badge number? Are you pressing charges? The military is handling it, David assured her. General Williams was there. It is being taken seriously. It better be, Jennifer said. This is unacceptable, David. You cannot just let this go. I am not letting it go, he said patiently. But I am also not going to let it consume me. Morrison made a mistake and he is paying for it. That is all I can ask for. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. You are a better person than I am. If someone treated me like that, I would sue them into oblivion. David smiled slightly. Maybe I still will. But right now I just want to have tea with Mom and forget about it for a while. Okay, Jennifer said. But call me if you need anything. I mean it. I will. Love you. Love you too. His mother returned with 2 cups of tea and a plate of cookies she had baked that morning. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, drinking tea and not talking about police officers or racial profiling or anything heavy. Finally, his mother said, Do you remember when you first told me you wanted to join the army? David nodded. You were not happy about it. I was terrified, she admitted. I had already lost your father. The thought of losing you too was unbearable. But you were so determined, so certain it was what you were meant to do. It was, David said. It is. I know, his mother said. And I am so proud of you. What you have accomplished, what you have become, it is remarkable. But moments like today remind me that no matter how high you rise, some people will still see you as less than human because of your skin. David had no answer to that. It was simply the truth. His mother continued, "When I came to this country, I thought my children would have opportunities I never had. And you have had those opportunities. You have achieved things I could never have imagined, but you have also faced obstacles I hoped you would never encounter. Mom, let me finish," she said gently. "What I want you to know is that what happened today does not define you. That officer's ignorance and prejudice say nothing about who you are. You are a colonel. You are a leader. You are a good man. Remember that." David felt tears prick his eyes, but he blinked them back. "Thank you, Mom." They sat together until the sun started to set, talking about easier things. His mother told him about her garden and her book club and the new family that had moved in next door. David told her about the upcoming training exercises at the base and Michael's latest accomplishments at school. They avoided the topic of the traffic stop, though it hung in the air between them like smoke. When David finally left, promising to visit again soon, he felt more settled. His mother had a way of putting things in perspective, of reminding him what was truly important. The drive back to base was uneventful. No flashing lights appeared in his rearview mirror. No aggressive officers stopped him for imaginary traffic violations. It was just a peaceful evening drive, the kind that should have been normal but now felt like a small miracle. When he arrived at Fort Henderson, the gate guards saluted smartly as he passed through. David returned the salute and drove to his office. Even though it was late, he had work to do. There were always reports to read, decisions to make, soldiers who needed his attention. Captain Okoye was waiting in the outer office. "Sir, I wanted to check on you before I left for the day. How are you holding up?" "I am fine, James," David said, "though I appreciate your concern." "The video has gone viral," Okoye said carefully. "Over 1 million views already. The comments are overwhelmingly in your favor, if that helps." David sighed. He had hoped the video would not spread so widely, but he had known it was inevitable. Any response from the department? Chief Thompson issued a statement apologizing for the incident and promising a thorough investigation. He also announced that Officer Morrison has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. What about the other cases Major Walsh mentioned? The pattern of similar stops? The Major is coordinating with the State Attorney General's office. They are opening a formal civil rights investigation into the Millbrook Police Department. David nodded. Good. If other people had been victimized by Morrison or officers like him, they deserve justice too. "One more thing, sir," Okoye said. "You have received interview requests from several major news outlets. They want to hear your side of the story." David thought about that. Part of him wanted to tell his story, to put a face and a voice to what had happened. But another part of him just wanted to move on. He had already given them enough by being there, by being recorded, by having his humiliation broadcast to millions. "Tell them I decline," David said. "This is not about me seeking attention. It is about holding a police department accountable for its actions." "Understood, sir. I will handle the media requests." After Okoye left, David sat alone in his office looking at the photographs on his wall. Pictures of his units, his deployments, ceremonies, and commendations. Evidence of a career built on service and sacrifice. In one photo, he stood next to General Williams after receiving the Bronze Star. In another, he was surrounded by his soldiers, all of them smiling despite the harsh conditions of the deployment. These were his people. These were the men and women who saw him for who he truly was, not just what he looked like. They followed him into danger because they trusted his leadership, his judgment, his character. Officer Morrison had seen none of that. He had seen only a middle-aged Asian man and made assumptions based on stereotypes and prejudice. David's computer dinged with a new email. It was from Rodriguez, the older officer who had been Morrison's partner during the stop. "Colonel Park," the email read, "I wanted to follow up on our conversation earlier today. I have been thinking a lot about what you said, about being the kind of officer who stands up when it matters. I wanted you to know that I have requested a meeting with Chief Thompson to discuss implementing new training protocols and improving our department's procedures for handling traffic stops. I am also volunteering to serve on the review committee that will be examining Morrison's other stops. I know I cannot undo what happened today, but I want to make sure it does not happen again. Thank you for serving our country with honor." Respectfully, Officer Vincent Rodriguez. David read the email twice, then replied briefly. Officer Rodriguez, thank you for your email and for taking steps to improve your department. Real change requires courage, and I am glad to see you are willing to be part of that change. I wish you success in your efforts. Respectfully, Colonel David Park. It was not much, but it was something. One officer trying to be better, trying to do the right thing even when it was difficult. If Rodriguez followed through, maybe some good could come from this terrible day. David stayed at his office until late, working on routine matters and trying not to think about handcuffs and accusations and laughter. When he finally drove home to his small house off base, he felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. He called his son before bed. Michael answered immediately. Dad, are you really okay? I'm okay, David said. I promise. I watched the video, Michael said quietly. It made me so angry. The way that cop talked to you. The way he treated you like a criminal. You are a colonel, Dad. You have served for over 20 years. How could he? He did not see those things, David interrupted gently. He only saw what he expected to see. That is the danger of prejudice, Michael. It blinds people to the truth. What is going to happen to him? He has been suspended pending an investigation. Beyond that, I do not know, but the important thing is that what he did is being taken seriously. They talked for a while longer, about school and friends and normal things. When they finally said goodnight, David felt a little better. His son was safe, thriving, building his own life. That was what mattered most. Before he went to sleep, David received one final message. It was from General Williams. David, I wanted you to know that I spoke with the Secretary of the Army this evening about what happened. He was appalled and wanted me to convey his personal support. We are arranging a meeting with local law enforcement leadership across the region to address these issues systematically. Your experience today will lead to meaningful change. I am sorry it had to happen, but I am grateful for how you handled it. Get some rest. Marcus. David put his phone down and lay in the darkness, thinking about change and courage and the long road ahead. One traffic stop would not fix decades of systemic problems. One suspended officer would not eliminate racial bias from policing. But maybe it was a start. Maybe his humiliation today would prevent someone else's tomorrow. He thought about all the people who did not have generals and military police to defend them, who faced Morrison and officers like him without the protection of rank or resources. Those were the people who really needed change, who really needed justice. Tomorrow he would continue the fight. Tomorrow he would work with the general to create real change in how military families were treated in these small towns. Tomorrow he would be the leader his soldiers needed him to be. But tonight he was just a tired man who had been judged by the color of his skin instead of the content of his character. And that knowledge hurt in ways that no amount of vindication could fully heal. Still, he had survived worse. He had led men in combat, had made life and death decisions, had carried wounded soldiers to safety under fire. He would survive this too, and maybe, just maybe, he would make the world a little bit better in the process. That thought brought some comfort as David finally closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. Captain Okoye was waiting in the outer office. Sir, I wanted to check on you before I left for the day. How are you holding up? I am fine, James, David said, though I appreciate your concern. The video has gone viral, Okoye said carefully. Over 1 million views already. The comments are overwhelmingly in your favor, if that helps. David sighed. He had hoped the video would not spread so widely, but he had known it was inevitable. Any response from the department? Chief Thompson issued a statement apologizing for the incident and promising a thorough investigation. He also announced that Officer Morrison has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. What about the other cases Major Walsh mentioned? The pattern of similar stops? The Major is coordinating with the State Attorney General's office. They are opening a formal civil rights investigation into the Millbrook Police Department. David nodded. Good. If other people had been victimized by Morrison or officers like him, they deserve justice too. One more thing, sir, Okoye said. You have received interview requests from several major news outlets. They want to hear your side of the story. David thought about that. Part of him wanted to tell his story, to put a face and a voice to what had happened. But another part of him just wanted to move on. He had already given them enough by being there, by being recorded, by having his humiliation broadcast to millions. Tell them I decline, David said. This is not about me seeking attention. It is about holding a police department accountable for its actions. Understood, sir. I will handle the media requests. After Okoye left, David sat alone in his office looking at the photographs on his wall. Pictures of his units, his deployments, ceremonies, and commendations. Evidence of a career built on service and sacrifice. In one photo, he stood next to General Williams after receiving the Bronze Star. In another, he was surrounded by his soldiers, all of them smiling despite the harsh conditions of the deployment. These were his people. These were the men and women who saw him for who he truly was, not just what he looked like. They followed him into danger because they trusted his leadership, his judgment, his character. Officer Morrison had seen none of that. He had seen only a middle-aged Asian man and made assumptions based on stereotypes and prejudice. David's computer dinged with a new email. It was from Rodriguez, the older officer who had been Morrison's partner during the stop. Colonel Park, the email read, I wanted to follow up on our conversation earlier today. I have been thinking a lot about what you said, about being the kind of officer who stands up when it matters. I wanted you to know that I have requested a meeting with Chief Thompson to discuss implementing new training protocols and improving our department's procedures for handling traffic stops. I am also volunteering to serve on the review committee that will be examining Morrison's other stops. I know I cannot undo what happened today, but I want to make sure it does not happen again. Thank you for serving our country with honor. Respectfully, Officer Vincent Rodriguez. David read the email twice, then replied briefly. Officer Rodriguez, thank you for your email and for taking steps to improve your department. Real change requires courage, and I am glad to see you are willing to be part of that change. I wish you success in your efforts. Respectfully, Colonel David Park, it was not much, but it was something. One officer trying to be better, trying to do the right thing even when it was difficult. If Rodriguez followed through, maybe some good could come from this terrible day. David stayed at his office until late, working on routine matters and trying not to think about handcuffs and accusations and laughter. When he finally drove home to his small house off base, he felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. He called his son before bed. Michael answered immediately. Dad, are you really okay? I'm okay, David said. I promise. I watched the video, Michael said quietly. It made me so angry. The way that cop talked to you. The way he treated you like a criminal. You are a colonel, Dad. You have served for over 20 years. How could he? He did not see those things, David interrupted gently. He only saw what he expected to see. That is the danger of prejudice, Michael. It blinds people to the truth. What is going to happen to him? He has been suspended pending an investigation. Beyond that, I do not know, but the important thing is that what he did is being taken seriously. They talked for a while longer, about school and friends and normal things. When they finally said goodnight, David felt a little better. His son was safe, thriving, building his own life. That was what mattered most. Before he went to sleep, David received one final message. It was from General Williams. David, I wanted you to know that I spoke with the Secretary of the Army this evening about what happened. He was appalled and wanted me to convey his personal support. We are arranging a meeting with local law enforcement leadership across the region to address these issues systematically. Your experience today will lead to meaningful change. I am sorry it had to happen, but I am grateful for how you handled it. Get some rest. Marcus. David put his phone down and lay in the darkness, thinking about change and courage and the long road ahead. One traffic stop would not fix decades of systemic problems. One suspended officer would not eliminate racial bias from policing. But maybe it was a start. Maybe his humiliation today would prevent someone else's tomorrow. He thought about all the people who did not have generals and military police to defend them, who faced Morrison and officers like him without the protection of rank or resources. Those were the people who really needed change, who really needed justice. Tomorrow he would continue the fight. Tomorrow he would work with the general to create real change in how military families were treated in these small towns. Tomorrow he would be the leader his soldiers needed him to be. But tonight he was just a tired man who had been judged by the color of his skin instead of the content of his character. And that knowledge hurt in ways that no amount of vindication could fully heal. Still, he had survived worse. He had led men in combat, had made life and death decisions, had carried wounded soldiers to safety under fire. He would survive this too, and maybe, just maybe, he would make the world a little bit better in the process. That thought brought some comfort as David finally closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep.